Your phone is warm in your hand. You just read what he wrote about you behind your back. Your jaw is tight. Your throat is tight. Your fingers are already moving toward the keyboard. You open your mouth too. Nothing comes out. You just found the deadliest weapon you own, and you have not used it yet. You know this feeling. Someone you trusted took a piece of you and used it against you. Maybe it was a friend who smiled at you on Friday and talked about you on Saturday. Maybe it was a partner who looked you dead in the eye while lying to your face. Maybe it was a coworker who took credit for your work in a room you were never invited into. The moment you found out, your whole body reacted before your mind even caught up. Your ears rang. Your hands wanted to shake. Your chest went hot, then cold, then hot again. Every cell in your body wanted to grab your phone and type a message so long and so sharp that they would finally understand what they did to you. Maybe it happened at work. You walked into a meeting and heard your own idea repeated back to the room in someone else's voice, and everyone nodded like it was theirs to give. You sat there smiling on the outside while something inside your chest folded in half. Or maybe it happened at home, in the quiet part of the night, when you finally saw the messages you were never supposed to see, and the floor of your own house suddenly felt like it was not yours anymore. Betrayal never asks permission before it changes the room you are standing in. It does not care if you were mid-sentence, mid-meal, mid-laugh with someone else entirely. It just walks in and rearranges the furniture of your life while you are still holding a fork, or a phone, or a hand you thought you could trust. You wanted to call them out in front of everyone. You wanted to post something so the whole world would see your side first. You wanted to tell every mutual friend your version before they could tell theirs. You wanted to call your mother, your brother, anyone who would sit still long enough to hear how badly you were wronged, just to feel less alone with it for 1 minute. You wanted to defend your name right now, this second, before the sun even finished setting on the day you found out. That urge is not weakness. That urge is human. Your body thinks speed is the same thing as strength. It is not. And that urge, the loud one, the fast one, is exactly what every person who ever betrayed someone is counting on when they do it. Here is the reframe. The loudest response to betrayal is the easiest one to survive. A man who yells can be out-argued. A man who explains himself can be picked apart, sentence by sentence. A man who explodes gives away every card in his hand in the first 30 seconds. And the person who hurt him gets to see exactly how deep the wound went. But a man who says nothing gives away nothing. Silence is not the absence of a response. Silence is a response with no weakness in it for the other person to grab onto. And silence does something else too. It leaves the person who betrayed you wondering. They do not know what you know. They do not know what you are planning. They do not know if you are hurt or calm or already 3 steps ahead of them. And that not knowing eats at a guilty mind far worse than any accusation you could shout at them. A person who wronged you can prepare an answer for your anger. They cannot prepare an answer for your quiet because you never told them what it means. Niccolò Machiavelli studied power for one reason. He watched men lose everything the moment they showed what they were feeling. He served the city of Florence as a diplomat for years, sitting in rooms with princes, popes, and generals, watching how quickly a man's future could collapse the second his enemies knew what he was thinking. And he noticed something most people still miss 500 years later. The men who survived betrayal were rarely the ones who reacted fastest. They were the ones who reacted last and only once, and completely. In the year 1502, Machiavelli was sent by Florence to observe a young and ruthless commander named Cesare Borgia, who was carving out territory across a lawless region called Romagna. For years, the region had been ruled by small feuding lords who let it rot. Robbers ruled the roads. Old grudges ruled the towns. Borgia needed the region under control fast, so he placed a man named Ramiro de Orco in charge and handed him total power to crush the chaos however he saw fit. Ramiro did exactly that, and he did it without mercy. He hunted down criminals. He crushed rebellious nobles who refused to bend. He restored order with a hand so hard and so fast that the people of Romagna began to fear him more than they had ever feared the criminals he replaced. They whispered his name behind closed doors. They crossed the street when they saw him coming. And through all of it, Cesare Borgia said nothing. He did not warn Ramiro. He did not defend him in public. He did not explain his plan to a single soul who did not already need to know it. He simply watched and waited, and let Ramiro become the face of every ounce of hatred building in the region. Then, one winter morning, the people of the town of Cesena walked into the main square on their way to the market and stopped cold. Ramiro de Orco was lying there in two pieces, with a block of wood and a bloody knife placed beside him, in complete silence, with no trial and no announcement, and no warning that anyone remembered hearing beforehand. There had been no public argument between Borgia and his enforcer. No rumor had leaked in the days before. The people of Cesena had gone to sleep the night before, believing tomorrow would look exactly like every other day under Ramiro's hard rule, and they woke up to a message written in the coldest language there is. Cesare Borgia had let his own enforcer absorb the full weight of the people's hatred, and then, in one total and silent act, he removed the source of that hatred and handed the people someone new to thank. Machiavelli wrote about this scene because it taught him something he never forgot. The people did not turn on Borgia for what happened in that square. They were stunned into a strange kind of relief. He had said nothing the entire time, and in saying nothing, he had controlled everything. What if the true weapon was never the anger sitting in your chest, but the silence you hold before you strike? Nobody in this video is telling you to hurt another human being. You do not need a wooden block and a knife, but you need to understand the principles sitting underneath that scene in Cesena. The moment you announce your anger, you lose your advantage. The moment you explain your next move out loud, you hand the other person time to prepare a defense against it. The move that actually changes something is always the one nobody saw coming, because nobody heard you talk about it first. Machiavelli spent years studying failed plots against powerful men, and he noticed the same pattern over and over. The plans rarely failed because the men behind them lacked courage. They failed because the men behind them could not control their own mouths. In 1478, a group of conspirators in Florence, backed by a rival family called the Pazzi, plotted to kill the two brothers who ruled the city, Lorenzo and Giuliano de Medici, during Sunday Mass inside the cathedral. Word of the plan spread further than it should have. Extra men had to be pulled in at the last minute. Nerves ran high. The plan went off half-broken. Giuliano was killed at the altar, but Lorenzo escaped with only a wound, and within days the conspirators were hunted down and hanged from the windows of the city hall. Look at what Lorenzo did after that day, because it says as much as the failed plot itself. He had just watched his own brother die in front of him. Every instinct in his body must have wanted blood immediately, in the streets, that same hour. Instead, he let the machinery of the city work methodically, over days and weeks, quietly identifying every last person connected to the plot, without ever announcing the full extent of his plan in advance. By the time it was finished, every conspirator who could be found was found, and Lorenzo emerged from the tragedy with more public loyalty than he had before it happened. A plan meant to remove two powerful brothers ended with one dead enemy, and one enemy who now ruled with more power and more support than ever. Machiavelli studied both sides of that failure for the rest of his life, the loud plot that collapsed and the quiet response that succeeded. And the lesson he took from it was simple. A plan spoken to too many people is already a dead plan, and a response delivered without warning is the only kind an enemy cannot prepare for. You are not plotting anyone's death, and this channel is never going to tell you to. But the same rule that decided who survived that cathedral and who ended up hanging from a window still decides who survives betrayal today. The version of you who tells everyone the plan loses control of it. The version of you who says nothing keeps every ounce of that control in his own two hands. This is not really about plots against powerful men. This is about you, right now, sitting with a hurt that wants to turn into words. So what do you do with the fire in your chest while you wait? You do not smother it. You do not pretend it is not there. You feed it into something quiet instead of something loud. You start gathering facts instead of typing accusations. You start looking at your actual options instead of rehearsing what you will say to the person who hurt you. You start deciding what you want to build next instead of deciding what you want them to feel today. The fire does not go away. It just stops leaking out of your mouth in front of everyone and starts pouring into your next move where nobody can see it yet. Machiavelli learned this the hard way, not just by watching other men from a safe distance, but by living through it himself. In 1512, the ruling family of Florence, the Medici, returned to power, and Machiavelli, who had served the previous government for years, was suddenly on the wrong side of history. He was accused of conspiracy against the new rulers. He was arrested, thrown in a cell, and tortured. When he was finally released, he was banned from the city he loved and sent away to a small farm at Sant'Andrea in Percusina, cut off completely from the political life that had given his entire existence meaning. He could have written bitter letters to every official in Florence. He could have begged loudly for forgiveness in front of anyone who would listen. He could have spent his exile proving his innocence at the top of his lungs. Instead, in a letter to his friend Francesco Vittori, he described what his actual days looked like. By morning, he wore plain, rough clothes and walked out among woodcutters and innkeepers, playing cards for pennies, cursing over bad hands, arguing about the game just like every other man from the village. Anyone watching him during the day would have seen a broken man who had quietly accepted a small, forgotten life on the edge of nowhere. But at night, alone in his own study, he changed out of those plain clothes and put on the formal robes he used to wear inside the halls of government. He sat down with the works of ancient writers and old generals, and in complete silence, with nobody watching him and nobody expecting a single thing from him, he began building the very book that would eventually try to win his relevance back. The men who exiled him believed he had disappeared for good. What they could not see was that invisible was exactly where he needed to be to build something they would eventually have to reckon with. You already know what it feels like to open your mouth and have nothing come out. Now you get to decide what that silence is actually for. See yourself 6 months from today. The person who betrayed you has moved on with their own life, telling the story their own way, maybe laughing about it with someone new, believing the whole thing is behind them for good. And then, out of nowhere, they hear what you actually built in the silence they thought meant nothing. The job they never saw coming. The version of you that no longer needs anything from them. The calm in your voice when your name finally does come up in a room. That moment lands so much harder than anything you could have typed back on the night it happened, because it was never explained in advance. It simply arrived, complete, the way Borgia's answer arrived in that square, the way Machiavelli's book arrived after everyone thought his career was already over. What are you building right now while the people who hurt you assume you have already lost? From the outside, a man in this kind of silence looks almost boring. He shows up to work on time. He answers when his name is called. He eats his food, does his job, goes home, and says goodnight like any other day. Nobody watching him would guess that behind that steady face is a mind working harder than it ever has, sorting through every option, weighing every next step, refusing to waste a single word on the one thing everyone expects him to be shouting about. That calm is not numbness. It is the surface of deep water that is moving fast underneath, where nobody can see it until it reaches the shore. There is a line from Machiavelli that cuts straight through most of what people get wrong about revenge and reaction. He wrote that men should be treated well or crushed completely because a man can forgive a small injury done to him, but he can never forgive one that takes away his ability to strike back. Read that again, slowly. A small, loud, angry response is the kind a person recovers from in a week and resents you for afterward. A complete, silent, total response is the kind that leaves nothing behind for anyone to fight. This is the difference between the weak reaction and the disciplined one. The weak man explains himself for an hour, hoping the person who hurt him finally understands how much damage they caused. The disciplined man says nothing and simply stops needing that person in his life at all. The weak man posts about it online, fishing for sympathy from strangers who will forget his pain by tomorrow. The disciplined man quietly removes the person from every corner of his life without ever announcing the decision out loud. The weak man tells you exactly what he plans to do before he does it. The disciplined man is already 3 steps ahead by the time anyone even notices he moved. So sit with the two men side by side for a moment, because you have been both of them at different points in your life, and only one of them ever actually won anything. Ask yourself something. Who betrayed you and still has no idea what you are actually capable of? And what have you been about to say for weeks now that you still have not said out loud to anyone? Sit with that question, because it matters more than it feels like it does right now. That silence you have been carrying is not empty. It has weight. It has direction. It is already doing more work than any message you could send tonight. Every person who ever betrayed you is still walking around today thinking they got away with it clean. Let them keep thinking that. Let them stay comfortable. Let them sleep just fine tonight, because comfort in an enemy is the softest trap there is. While they believe the story already ended, you get to spend that time becoming a man they never accounted for and never prepared for. This is the part where you decide if you are the man who explains himself for the rest of his life, or the man who simply stops needing anyone's understanding at all. This is the part where the fire either leaks out of you in pieces, wasted on people who never deserved an explanation, or it gets aimed at something worth building. Every text you do not send tonight is a brick. Every explanation you swallow is a brick. Stack enough of them in silence, and one day you look up and you have built an entire version of yourself that never needed their apology to begin with. If you are done explaining yourself to people who already decided not to believe you, subscribe right now, because this channel exists for men who are quietly building something in the dark, the exact way Machiavelli built his in that small farmhouse outside Florence, while everyone assumed he was finished. You do not need a grand plan tonight. You just need the next right move, done quietly, and then the one after that. Here is what you actually do with all of this, starting today. First, you do not respond right now. Not one text back, not one comment. Give it a full day at minimum, longer if you can stand it, because the first thing you say after betrayal is almost always the weakest thing you will ever say, and you cannot take it back once it leaves your mouth. Put the phone down, go for a walk, breathe, do anything with your hands, but do not let your thumbs make a decision your future self will have to live with. Second, you write down what you actually want the final outcome to be, not what you want to say to them in the heat of the moment. There is a real difference between wanting to be heard and wanting to win, and only one of those two things actually changes your life for the better. Third, you decide exactly what you are building before you ever say a single word to the person who hurt you. Maybe that is a new job somewhere they will never touch again. Maybe that is a new circle of people who never met them. Maybe that is simply your own peace, rebuilt somewhere they no longer have access to. Fourth, when you finally do respond, or act, or walk away for good, you do it completely, calmly, and once. Machiavelli warned against half measures for a reason that still applies today. A half-hearted response leaves your enemy room to recover and come back stronger than before. A complete one leaves nothing behind for them to come back to at all. Fifth, guard who you let into the story while it is still unfolding. Not every friend who asks needs to know the whole plan, and not every relative who worries needs a play-by-play of what you are about to do. Machiavelli lost more than one ally simply because word traveled to the wrong ear at the wrong time. Tell the people you trust only as much as they truly need, and let the rest of the world find out when there is nothing left for them to interfere with. Sixth, stop trying to win the story in real time. You do not owe anyone a play-by-play of your pain, and you do not need the room to agree with you today. Let your reputation catch up later, built on what you actually did instead of what you managed to say in the moment. A man who is proven right by his results needs far fewer words than a man who is still trying to convince a crowd he is right while the wound is still fresh. Patience like this is not the same thing as doing nothing. Doing nothing is a man who never plans to move at all. This is a man loading every hour of silence with something useful, a fact confirmed, a door quietly opened somewhere else, a version of his life being built, one floor at a time, where the person who hurt him no longer has a key. Nobody watching you during the quiet weeks will know the difference between a man who gave up and a man who is preparing, and that is exactly the point. Let them guess wrong. Let them find out later, all at once, the way the people of Cesena found out, the way Florence eventually found out what a broken man on a small farm had been writing at night the whole time. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about becoming a man who feels nothing when he is wronged. It is about becoming a man whose reactions are no longer available for other people to use against him. You are allowed to feel the fire in your chest. You are just no longer allowed to let that fire speak before you decide it should. You opened your mouth once back at the start of all this, and nothing came out. For the first time in your life, let that silence be on purpose. Let it be the sound of a plan being built, not the sound of a man with nothing left to say. That is the version of you this channel exists for. That is the version of you Machiavelli would recognize instantly, sitting quietly at night in his own private study, building something no one else could see yet, waiting for the one moment it would finally matter. He never got to see how history would remember him while he was living through that exile, and you will not get to see the whole shape of your own comeback while you are still standing in the middle of it. Build it anyway. Let the silence do what shouting never could. Somewhere down the road, someone will ask you how you managed to stay so calm through all of it, and you will not need a long answer for that either. A quiet nod will be enough. It always is, for a man who already knows what he built while everyone else was still waiting for him to say something.